so what is our topic for tonight? Our topic for tonight is AR, VR. Beyond the hype, what's going on? Why is it hot? What's happening with augmented reality or virtual reality? Again, you know, hot off the press. Last week at the Microsoft Build conference, right? I mean, what did they announce? Mixed reality controllers. Right? I mean, so now you take VR, you take AR, you put them together, and there's mixed reality. You're looking at things that are, you know, holographic devices or immersive devices, and they're going to talk all about that today. And it's the hot topic. It's why the Wireless Technology Forum wants to make sure we bring you the hottest and the latest things. So without going on with any further ado, I'd like to bring up Joe Conway, the CEO of Stable Kernel, who's going to be our moderator. Hang on a second.
Is it working? It's working.
It is.
Hey, I'm Joe Conway, CEO of Stable Kernel, and we build mobile software for your company. And I'd like to invite onto the stage our distinguished panelists. If they could all come and join, I'll have them introduce themselves here. Start with Grace.
Hi, my name is Grace Ahn. I'm an associate professor of advertising at Grady College, University of Georgia, and the director of the Games and Virtual Environments Lab there. The lab opened in 2011, so it's been about 7 years since we've been researching essentially how these virtual experiences in both AR and VR or mixed realities, they really shape the way that we think and behave in the real world. And so we have a lot of really exciting kind of envelope-pushing research being conducted at the University of Georgia.
Hey everybody, my name is John Buzzell, and I am a proud Grady School of Journalism graduate, Advertising 93, go Bulldogs. I run an immersive experiences studio called You Are Here over by the new SunTrust Braves Stadium. I've got 27 years in doing all types of digital media and interactive technology. About 4 years ago, we started a lab. We started wanting to get beyond the rectangle of the browser or beyond the rectangle of the app screen. And so lately we've been focusing, over the last 3 or 4 years, focusing on augmented, virtual, and mixed reality, primarily bringing digital experiences into physical spaces for brands. We do a lot of B2B at trade shows, at retail, and we do it at events for clients like AT&T, Aflac, Anheuser-Busch, NBC Sports, Kellogg's, and Coca-Cola, and Porsche, some others. So pleasure to be here tonight.
Hey guys, this is Ian. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm the co-founder and CTO of a company called Aetho. We've been around for a few years now, and we've been focused in the last 18 months or so, as the technology has really progressed, on our platform called Thrive. Thrive is an enterprise-focused platform really built around B2B environments and designed from the ground up for mixed reality. So we're 100% focused on Microsoft HoloLens and MR devices as they continue to evolve. And for us, we're really focused on building a both IP portfolio, a UX understanding, and a right market fit that at the end of the day all comes together to provide a one-to-one scale experience where I might be in China, the rest of you might be in another country, and just by putting on a device, we can have a conversation and work together just as if we were in the same room. So really excited to be here today, and thanks.
Awesome. Well, starting about getting rid of the hype, AR, VR, MR. If I look up any of these terms on the internet, someone's going to tell me it's new and exciting, but I don't have the best layman's definition. Is there a way you could kind of break that down and say, these are the 3 things and these are why we care about them?
I think we were just talking about these terminologies. I feel like a lot of this will become obsolete in the coming years as everything converges together into a much more mixed version of this. But as of now, the hardware devices, I think, really kind of define whether we call something a VR or an AR experience. Virtual reality tends to be a little bit more immersive. It cuts you off from the physical world where you are now immersed in a different virtually established, a digitally established world. AR is a little bit more into the physical world in which you are in the physical world, but you have an overlay, a digital overlay that is integrated into your physical world so that you're kind of sitting where we are right now, but with an AR device, you should be able to see digital elements that are integrated naturally into your world.
Yeah, I would like that. I'd like to underscore the importance of what Dr. An just said about how this is temporary. If you go on Google Trends and you look at terms, virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, it's not even a competition. VR is, I mean, sky high above everything else. However, the format discussion right now will be as irrelevant as video formats and audio formats are now. You know, it wasn't so long ago we were all talking about OGG Vorbis and MP3s and AU files and can my device support that? Nobody cares about that anymore, right? Unless you're in the industry or a compression nerd, you really don't care about that. Similarly with video, there was so much talk about can we get to MP4 or I have an AVI or what about my WMP file? Now people just go on YouTube. This is a temporary issue while everybody sorts out hardware and software. It's hard to predict who the winner is going to be. There's a lot of human factors, you know, business deals that are going to determine who has the greatest distribution. But this is, don't get lost in that. Don't let this be an impediment to you getting started because, you know, I think history will favor the people who got started quick.
I hate when people do this, but I'm going to do this. How many people in this room have ever worn a headset of some type?
Wow.
Perfect. Yes, yeah, we were debating backstage what this actually might look like.
We should get a picture of that. Everybody that had your hands up, please put your hands back up. That is awesome. That's rare.
This is very high concentration.
Thank you.
Yeah, even if I ask my undergraduates, I would say maybe 1 out of 30 or 40 in a classroom have ever used a VR headset. So, I mean, you guys are...
Well, is it a discoverability? Why aren't people checking this out? I mean, what's the impediment to getting people to use this?
I think there's a big psychological barrier above everything else for some reason. And I guess I started looking into virtual reality back in 2006 when I was a graduate student at Stanford, and they had a virtual reality lab there. Back then, a headset cost about $50,000. That was just 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago. And so I was really concerned every time I was in the lab that I would break one of these and then never graduate because I would have to pay it off. Our cheaper version of the headset was $30,000. In just 10 years, that has dropped down to something that you can find in Walmart even. Yeah. But the idea that VR is only confined in these sophisticated research laboratories has kind of stuck around for a while, and I think a lot of the consumers need to overcome the psychological barrier first. I think a lot of the gaming devices tend to reach out faster and quicker to the younger audiences. A lot of them have experience in playing PlayStation VR, for instance. But they may have not gotten the chance to purchase the Rift or the Vive. Also, there's a big limitation in terms of applications. And I think that's going to be the crux of the discussions here. How do we build applications so that everyday users see the utility to fork over $500, $1,000. Right now, the question is where are and how are they going to be using it on an everyday, daily basis?
So I want to kind of segue, and that's a great point. When you really look at where's the market opportunity right now, from our perspective, coming from, you know, how do we make money, right? How do we stay alive? How do we eat? It's those enterprise and B2B customers. Frankly, when you look at HoloLens, talking $3,000, and in terms of actually getting it into consumers' hands, it's still at least a year or two away. But right now, in terms of, and let's go back to the hardware for a second, what really defines a great hardware stack that you as a developer can start to really build experiences that turn that from a cool demo or a cool project into, hey, my project manager is getting calls from my guys, we need 10 more devices because they can't live without this. Right. How do you move the needle into that new world? And so when you look at HoloLens, and I don't want to pick on HoloLens specifically, but right now they are the best in class, and they offer a experience that when you get used to using that and you start to really develop applications around that, you can't go back. And I just want to talk briefly about when you're looking out at the real world, you're not focused in a virtual space, but you're still in the physical space. Mm-hmm. You're combining that with really great spatial reconstruction, where I'm looking out at the space, all of you, the world, the ceilings, the walls, are all being mapped in full 3D, which then you as a developer can start to access not just the head tracking and the hand tracking on the device, but start putting all of this together to where you forge this experience that right now no other hardware can match. And again, that goes back to us of how do you go from a technician at a factory in India who's trying to diagnose some issue on a piece of machinery, and rather than 3 technicians from the US flying there to stand side by side with that guy, which happens time and again at large companies, how do you build a solution that they can put on their head and have that same, if not better experience, that human connection, that visceral understanding, that side-by-side workmanship? That's something that right now HoloLens can only offer. And so I think it's really exciting in that it is what it is. It's very expensive. There are limitations, but I look at that as a basis where, almost like the iPhone when it launched, it had certain inputs, outputs, and all the other manufacturers followed foot. So we're in a really great spot right now that's very early, and I think some of these earlier VR devices, Google Cardboard, help spur the industry as a whole, but quite frankly, the place that things are headed is in 10 years, this room is going to look a lot different than it is today.
If we're here, yeah.
If we're here, even.
I'd like to add to that, the consumer space is a big obstacle to people. We've put thousands of people through VR and AR experiences in the trade show, retail, entertainment space, and we're all humans, right? I mean, the iPhone technology, has been in the consumer's hand for 10 years, but we're all still adjusting to new social norms around when it's appropriate to use it in someone's presence. But meanwhile, we have 50,000-year-old brains or more, and we're still struggling with, I don't want to look foolish, I'm uncomfortable when I'm blindfolded, what if somebody takes my stuff, I don't want to trip and fall and hurt myself, It's going to be difficult for VR to overcome that. VR is like the movie theater. It's the best possible storytelling experience that you could hope to have, and you are immersed and you are swept away somewhere else. But if you have to get across town to do something, it's not a great time for VR, right? So AR is like VR's practical brother or sister, where it is a heads-up display for your life. And people are so focused on, there's 25 million Steam users, why isn't VR taking off? Well, get beyond the fact that consumers don't have an extra $800 for a Vive yet because they just spent $1,500 on a gaming PC that's VR ready. But if you look at the problems that VR and AR can solve, the audience problem starts to melt away because businesses are willing to spend $3,500 on a HoloLens or $5,000 on a HoloLens with a commercial license. They're willing to spend the square footage required for a room scale environment to use a Vive or an Oculus Rift because this technology is more than just another layer on your life. It brings context, immediacy, it brings community and focus, and can help you solve engineering problems, medical problems, training problems, logistical problems that otherwise would require an army of people and miles of Ethernet cable to solve. So I think it's important while we wait for the format battle to settle out to focus on solving problems with AR that you can do today because it's too difficult to predict consumer behavior and when they're all going to show up.
That Google announced their Daydream platform, that was today, I believe, and now you have your Microsoft's platform, you have the Oculus Rift, you have all these different platforms. Are we going to end up in a situation where there's 2 winners and people are picking 50-50 like iOS and Android and we're all writing software for those things? Or is there going to be a little bit more?
I'll do a quick answer on that. We standardize on a software called Unity. Unity owns Unity. I wish, well, someday probably Adobe or somebody else smart will buy Unity if they're willing to be sold, but it allows us to get to multiple devices very quickly. I'll give you an example. We have a luxury auto manufacturer client, and we did a HoloLens experience for them as a proof of concept. A day after we finished the demo, we ported it to Vive and made it collaborative so that someone could be in a room scale environment, completely blindfolded with high resolution graphics, and there are 4 people next to them working on the same 3D object in real time with HoloLenses on. So Unity is the place where it's at right now. It has been for a while with mobile game development and even to some degree mobile app development. There's probably going to be somebody else that comes along. I know Adobe is gearing up to try to bring out their stack.
What are you guys using for the same thing? Is that everyone using that?
100% Unity, full stack dev, Azure, a bunch of these things, but Unity on the HoloLens side, that's 100%.
Yeah, we're also using Unity just for almost every type of hardware device that we have, the Vive, Rift, HoloLens. And I did want to quickly add that that a lot of the contexts that we're not currently thinking about, is possible within virtual reality. So it's not just an augmented reality solution where you're overlaying a digital layer over your physical world, but there are instances where you want to get away from the physical world. You want to play around with the dimension of time. You want to play around with the dimension of space. You want to become a completely new person. And for these solutions, you really have to think outside of the box. And right now, I think a lot of our development effort is really concentrated on the hardware. So now we have a problem where we're coming up with a lot of really sophisticated hardware, but not enough content. And that's where the human factor lies. We need these devices not because they're sophisticated devices, but because we have use for them. And if we don't research what it is that people are using these devices for, or at least provide some sort of a solution where they figure out that there's a better use for virtual reality or augmented reality than the ones that we currently know, then I don't know if we would be able to persuade these people to purchase the devices. So they buy it, and then what happens? Where do they use these devices for?
I'd like to add to that. Your brain is really sophisticated at adapting to different levels of fidelity. And with television, we've been so obsessed with, standard def or color, standard def, HD, 4K, 8K, that's never going to end. I guess at some level your eye will not be able to detect the resolution. But with VR, there are experiences that are black and white that have, primitive spheres and pyramids and boxes that are way more engaging and intuitive than things that have, PS4 quality graphics. Your brain really doesn't care about that stuff. What it cares about is that it reacts consistently with other objects in that virtual world, whether it's augmented or mixed reality. So if you push something and you are portraying real world physics, if other objects in that space don't also abide by those same rules, then you're out of the experience. You've had an attentional blink and you've lost focus. But the people that put the time, as Grace was saying, to making it intuitive and making it natural, you don't need a graphics engineer. You just need to make it human.
And sometimes I kind of wonder about why we are focusing so much on recreating the most realistic world that we can in virtual worlds. Because if you think about it, if I gave you the power to become any person in VR, right, would you want to become yourself? If I gave you the power to look like anyone, to have any power in this world in virtual reality, would you pick to look exactly like yourself and have your exact abilities? So sometimes I'm kind of like, well, why are we so focused and so hung up on recreating the physical world when we may not want to be in the physical world? What if we want something better? What if we want something that we couldn't have in the physical world? And what if virtual reality allows us to do that? That analogy with television is striking because now all these actors and celebrities are really concerned because now everyone can see every major flaw that they have on their face. And maybe our world was better when it was a little bit blurry. Right. Maybe we don't want crystal clear pictures. Maybe we don't want 4K televisions. You go over and you watch these 4K content, and sometimes it looks fake because you see all the flaws.
The jitter, yeah.
So that's a really great point. I want to kind of segue this into some of the stuff that we've been finding internally. So not to go too deep into what we're doing, but I want to paint a picture. In terms of you're tracking people's heads, you're tracking people's hands, you're mapping that with some other algorithms to generate an entire body, a rig, so to speak, and put those two people face to face where you and I are looking at each other right now, we're smiling, we're laughing, we're gesturing, we're having that conversation. It's us, but it's digital representations of ourselves. And you find very quickly, and I'm sure in the lab, these guys have been looking at it for a lot longer than we have, you hit these uncanny valley effects very quickly. And as we talk to those corporate partners and we talk to those focus group, tester groups, you see these interesting conversations spin up where it's, oh man, what if it looked like me? What if I looked like Angelina Jolie? What if I looked like, Brad Pitt? Right? But there's an issue where if you try to map real people onto these digital rigs, even though this is the real person's movements, your brain on a subconscious level very quickly gets freaked out and it becomes very weird and very awkward very quickly. And so we've gone in a very stylistic, artistic route in terms of how we've actually comprised those avatars. So it's all about giving you a physical presence where I can point to and talk to and gesture and look at you, but it's doing it in a way that clearly it is not a real person. And we can kind of skip some of that. And one of the really unique things that we found, not for ourselves, but actually listening to those focus group testers, is when they were communicating via our system, for the first time ever, whether or not people want to admit it, you have this preconceived notion when you first meet somebody just based off their physical appearance. I mean, that's just the reality. That's the way people are wired. And for the first time ever in this system, they had this opportunity where they were able to look somebody in the eye, discuss ideas, discuss concepts, gesture and animate those things, and do it in a way that totally stripped out that fat of this preconceived notion. And I think, you know, it's so early of a space right now, but you talk about offering this tool, this opportunity for others to collaborate and work together, not face-to-face, but anywhere on the planet in real time, and you've not stripped away that humanity, but you've almost added to it. Right. And this is getting very philosophical very quick, but it's a very interesting route that we're on. And again, you know, going back to, in 10 years, will we all be sitting in this room in person like this? Will we have a need to do that?
Well, it's kind of, as you guys were talking, I was wondering, do you guys see a limit as to what might be too far? If there's a world that we can live in that is no longer real. I don't know if you guys saw that Black Mirror show where their personality score was floating above their head and they would get downvoted and upvoted.
How many people use Snapchat in here and now Facebook, thank you Zuckerberg, of all these Facebook and Snapchat filters? I can't name a single person that isn't, I'm seeing on a day-to-day basis, put through a filter. And if you think about, you know, eyeglasses like the ones he's wearing right now being a mainstream product produced by Apple and Google in 10 years, if we're still in this room together, there's a high likelihood that I've got the elf filter on and all you guys look like gargoyles and elves to me, and there's waterfalls splashing out of the ceiling. And all that is state-of-the-art computer vision tech that is in wide products like Snapchat today. And so to extrapolate out not too far into the future, as the hardware and the software starts to come together, you're getting some very interesting concepts that are quickly becoming reality.
Well, you know, people lavished attention on that Second Life concept from a few years ago, and it was groundbreaking at the time, but where it fell down in a lot of respects is that there was no humanity. Ultimately, you were just kind of a floating statue in front of somebody else. So if you want to have an experience that will change your opinion on what VR specifically can do for community and collaboration, there's a free piece of software called Rec Room, R-E-C-R-O-O-M. It is a massively multiplayer casual play space. You can play beer pong, liquid pong with people. You can have paintball fights. You can play cards with each other, bumper pool. And people from all over the world, you're in there with university professors and 14-year-olds from France. And everybody's really well behaved in Rec Room, which I think is why it's special. It won't last that long, you know, because it's people have their best face on. But to everyone's point, I think we're better when we have, you know, some of our self-consciousness stripped away. And I think that there is so much opportunity, and yet people are so focused on, well, how many units has Samsung Gear shipped? And, oh, well, the phone has a battery that's going to explode, so no one's going to use VR anymore. That's all temporary.
So in the lab, we've been conducting a lot of very interesting studies that look at identity. And how we perceive identity in the physical world versus the virtual world. And so it turns out that it's really easy to create an avatar, a photorealistic avatar that looks exactly like you. But here's the kicker. So once I create this avatar, any third party can do whatever they want with that avatar. I just need 2 photographs, one frontal, one profile, and I can wrap it around an avatar mesh and then create an avatar that looks exactly like you, but someone else will control that. So think about the potentials of, evils, of advertising, of essentially anything that you can make this avatar do. I study a phenomenon that I call self-endorsing. So this is where your virtual self is persuading your physical self. So an avatar that looks exactly like me can say, Grace, I know that you like Coke. I know because I'm you. But can you say no to yourself? Can you? Someone that looks exactly like you is telling you to buy something. Can you say no? Turns out a lot of people can't. Because it's really hard to not like yourself. It's really hard. Usually, you have this self-positivity bias. You think you're a little bit better. You think you're a little bit more intelligent. You think you're a little bit better looking than everyone else in this room. Deep down inside. Helps you sleep better at nights. So usually, when we call them virtual doppelgangers. And so once we take these virtual doppelgangers, think about the idea of identity theft. How do you know who is behind that avatar, controlling that digital being? How do you know it's not my younger brother? How do you know it's not one of my students? How do you know it's me? How do you know what kind of facial expression I'm making? I can do things like, if I am interacting with my boss's avatar, my avatar smiles ever so slightly even wider. Impression management. Right? I'm at a meeting, and although my physical self is yawning and I'm not paying attention, my avatar is alert, nodding the head, going, yeah, you have a great point. That was amazing. So how do you know? And so the understanding, the fundamental rules of communication and social interaction as we know it in this physical world will become completely new, completely different in a virtual world where identity is no longer what we understand it now.
I'd like to note something. There's a couple of copies of a book, The Fourth Transformation, that are being given away tonight. If you don't win, go buy that book. There's a guy, Robert Scoble, very prominent tech blogger, did 3 or 4 years worth of research lining up all of the investments and human capital and dollars that Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Google, companies like that are making, and it's kind of a impervious argument that he's making that these devices are going to come out with these technologies. Agencies are going to bring these experiences to brands. Brands are going to bring these experiences to people with the hardware, and people will follow. So we could go on for absolute days or weeks about the urgency and the inevitability of some of these things. All these technologies that we've been hearing about for years, eye tracking, sentiment tracking, computer vision, the top innovator was talking about photogrammetry, taking pictures of things from different angles to get algorithmically at geometry and measurement. Those are all, they exist today. They just don't all exist in the device. I mean, this was the original augmented reality, and it does one thing, it does it pretty well. But eventually there'll be an array of sensors and devices inside of this that handle everything that my phone does for me now, and it will disintermediate me from having to swipe or click on things, and will bring it all contextually and streamlined into the real world. We're seeing that today. I know there was an ROI bent to the title for this thing, Getting Beyond the Hype. Right now, and there's nothing special about us except that we're happening to do it, and we've got some experience, but we're seeing 4 to 5 times the engagement, experientially that we used to see with touchscreens or videos. When people get a good experience on their face, they stick around and they do things that they wouldn't do, and they lose that sense of self-consciousness, especially with AR, and they don't have to worry about who's going to steal my bag, and who, to some degree you can do this stuff where they don't worry about the germs that are going to get on their face if they're the 1,000th person putting on VR. There are companies like both of us and programs at UGA that are doing this kind of stuff right now with technology that exists. So don't sit out, don't wait. Find someone and grill them so that you know that they know what they're doing, because it's easy to say you're in this space, it's hard to actually do it. And start experimenting. I'm not trying to wrap things up. I'm just, it sounds like it. Sorry, no. You can get started right now with an intro to Unity course online on YouTube video and a $500 phone, and you can start learning some of the same things that we've learned.
What's interesting is on my computer, which everyone has a computer now, I'll probably use Microsoft. I don't personally, but someone will use Microsoft Word every day. On your phone, you probably use email or Snapchat or something every single day. Are there applications like that will exist for these types of platforms that you'd be like, well, it's 8 a.m. and I use this app on my headset? And what are they? And sign away the rights to them.
Did you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, you guys are wireless technology cats. You're a little bit past my age. I'm still a kid, but I've seen the trajectory that mobile has taken, and when I started high school in 2006 to today, 10-ish years, you went from nobody has a phone, or if they had one, it was a little dinky razor or something, to, I mean, look around this room, how many people are on their phones right now? My watch just keeps going off, connected to my phone. So you've got this, like, this creep, almost like the frog in water that slowly gets turned up, the heat, and it doesn't realize until it's boiling hot that it's fully immersed. I think you're going to see the same trajectory with these headsets. So to kind of follow on what John is saying, we're on this path where we're up here today talking to you about this stuff, but I think it's going to be very quick in 5 years where we're just another one in an audience where everybody's doing this, and this is just day-to-day business. And it's not just day-to-day business in what you're doing in your enterprise or your particular market segment, but it is quite literally on your face, and you're talking to your wife and your girlfriend and your boyfriend, and you're talking to all your buddies, and you're checking your email, and you're doing all this work that, just like you do today on your phone, as all these people back here are on their phones right now doing, it's just something that doesn't even, it's almost silly to me that this gets brought up so much, and we deal with partners and industries that have a lot of money and have a lot of resources and people, and it's so blindingly obvious that this is where the industry's headed as a whole. And I think Scoble's book does a great job of profiling how much money and investment is going on behind the scenes at all landscapes of the large tech companies across the globe that are so big in size, in funding, and the vision is not just a vision, but is very quick becoming a reality behind the scenes, that in 2 to 3 years, the landscape is going to evolve so fast. I mean, you got to understand the Oculus Kickstarter that kicked this all off was basically 2013. We're talking just a few years in time.
The HoloLens came out like a year and a half ago.
And it's happening at such a fast rate that even for us sitting around all day, every day doing this, talking to customers, talking to partners, et cetera, the rate of movement internally that it's going is so fast that I have no doubts that everybody, no matter what business, what market, what you do in your personal life, you will be affected by this in such a short order, in such a dramatic way. So, if there's one takeaway, yeah, get started with Unity, get started with X, Y, and Z blog that writes about this, because this is the future, and, people are going to be left behind.
I think it's natural for all of us as human beings to be self-centered and think that, we're on top of it, that this is all it will ever be, that, we're going to move from, discovery to mastery. But technology doesn't stop, and that book does talk about that. Computers, some of the people in this room, you probably remember there's a time computers used to be something you would go visit, right? And then you were lucky to have one in your office or at your uncle's house, right? And then you were lucky to have one on your desk because, gosh, you could finally get at that spreadsheet without having to do this, And then, it was in your pocket. Oh, now it's on my wrist. Well, guess what? It's coming for your face, and it's already on the way. Like, some people are already doing this. And Google did a phenomenally horrible job. I hope there's no Google people in here. I love your company. Please keep making money. But with the Google Glass, which gets derided every time any of this stuff comes up, they went for the consumer first. They said, hey, Google Glass is here. And everybody put it on and said, so what? It hurts my eyes to look over here in the corner all the time. They didn't go to the nurses and the first responders and the construction foremen and the manufacturers and the mechanical engineering and plumbing engineers. They didn't go for the use cases. They just went for the tech nerds. And that's why that failed, I think. This is starting to happen more where you have developers finding use cases because of a profit motive, or they're trying to find a truth or to prepare the next generation, and it's going the right way. So having been through diskette-based multimedia, narrowband internet, the early days of broadband video, and so it's easy to say, oh, this is just another hype train, and like 3D TV, it won't work out. There are human challenges out there, and just like 3D TV, people didn't buy that stuff because the glasses only had a single purpose. But like when Steve Jobs stood up on that stage and said, it's a web device, it's an email device, it's a texting device, it's a phone, it's a GPS. Like, that day is coming. It might be 3 years away. People speculate that it's going to be later this year. It will show up on the phone first with a glasses accessory like the Apple Watch, and then the phone will go away. And Moore's Law, right? Like, this stuff's just going to keep getting smaller and more invisible.
With all these big companies, the big four are obviously leading the charge here and coming out with a lot of technology, is there actual room to compete in the space? I mean, is it kind of just getting taken over by people with vastly more resources and more data and more money?
Well, so it's a great point. And, you know, I think out of the entire landscape of the Googles and the Microsofts, et cetera, the Apples, of course, you have a company like Magic Leap, for example. Magic Leap, as you guys may know, they've raised $1.4 billion. They're on right now working with Alibaba to go after their Series D. It's probably going to be at least $1 billion, huge amount of money, but really a drop in the bucket in terms of what they're trying to do, in terms of building out an entire fully integrated production line of you've got the actual display components being produced, you are building your own hardware, you are writing your own OS, you are writing your own applications, you are building your own content creation studios to run on top of all that hardware and software, and ultimately delivering this to a end user, a consumer. So this huge, massive undertaking that, you know, even though they may have a few billion to throw around, it's nothing compared to the billions and billions and tens of billions that Microsoft and Apple are putting into this right now. So, I mean, HoloLens is really 3 or 4 years old in terms of that piece of hardware. The SoC on there and the integrated systems are very old. You know, you can run 100,000 poly on that thing. It's not that great. But what it does is set a precedent in terms of here's this base level in terms of user experience, in terms of inputs and outputs. And I think anything that comes beyond that, we're sort of, and I hate to say it, sorry Microsoft, I think you guys are awesome, but they need to be really pushing a little bit farther forward, because when I look at the HoloLens, it's almost like the Pocket PC with a GSM connection before the iPhone came out. And you kind of had this inkling of, hey, Pocket PC was awesome, you know, we could do a lot on it, but it wasn't until the iPhone with simple things like multi-touch that really wrapped that experience together and brought it into a wide market. And I think we're right on the cusp right now. As fast as all this moving, a company like Magic Leap, I have very little doubts when they drop later this year, are going to disrupt this entire conversation in a big way.
Well, I think, you know, getting back to your earlier question, there's not a killer app for this stuff yet that's has a broad audience. And the reason for that is that everybody's use case is...
The hardware's not there.
Right. Well, everybody's use case is a little bit different, right? If you're constructing a building and you're collaborating around how tall should the parking deck be, there are ways to do that. AR can help. But somebody else, they have a slightly different challenge, which means a rewrite of the application. So when you can start building AR and VR experiences in those technologies, and those things exist, but not in a meaningful retail way right now, or even on the business B2B market, that's when it's going to flip. When people can start creating holographic PowerPoint inside an experience like Microsoft HoloLens, then the network effects of that take off.
Well, that's an interesting...